There's nothing the internet likes more than a failed music festival. Perhaps since we've all been ripped off by one at some point in our lives, or perhaps since we envy the people who can afford a luxury cabana, we just can't not look away when a music festival goes down in flames.
We had no electricity, there was no showers, there's no bathrooms, there's no running water.
Chaos and anarchy have reigned since the very beginning of the modern music festival, as anyone at Woodstock or Altamont will attest. But there's one little-known event that truly takes the cake. Back in 1972, tucked away on the swampy banks of the Wabash River, 250,000 people spent their Labor Day weekend in truly Lord of the Flies-like conditions. This is the story of the Bull Island, Erie Canal, and Soda Pop Festival. So a little background first. The early 70s were a particularly reckless time for music festivals. On the heels of Woodstock and Monterey Pop, tons of young promoters thought, hey, this seems fun and profitable. Why don't we try this in our hometown? Because music festival promoter had yet to be something you could major in, all of these kids were basically winging it. A fake-it-till-you-make-it mentality. Bands were equally naive, lured by the prospect of big payouts, and music fans were determined not to miss the quote-unquote next Woodstock. So, in short, everyone was hyped about music festivals, and very few people were reading the fine print. So this is where our story begins. It's August 1972 in Evansville, Indiana, a small city on the northern edge of the Bible Belt. Two young music promoters, Bob Alexander and Tom Duncan, have just finalized plans to host the Erie Canal Soda Pop Festival. Joe Cocker and Black Sabbath are booked to headline. If Erie Canal Soda Pop sounds a bit whimsical to you, that's not a mistake. Earlier that summer, they had organized the Freedom Festival and Ice Cream Social, a one-day concert held in downtown Evansville. The reason for the innocent-sounding name, it's believed, was to avoid suspicion, perhaps to trick city officials from thinking it would be a massive drug party. Of course, being the early 70s and all, it was a massive drug party. The city was not so happy about damage to their beloved historic baseball field, and after a few attendees skirmished with police, it was enough to make the mayor of Evansville put his foot down and say, no more rock festivals. Now, fast forward 1 month, and Bob and Tom have already announced their follow-up event, a bigger, better 3-day fest over Labor Day weekend, to be called, of course, Erie Canal and Soda Pop Festival. It was to be held at Chandler Raceway, well outside Evansville city limits and outside the authority of the Evansville mayor. Contracts are signed, bands are booked, the Allman Brothers, Fleetwood Mac, and Rod Stewart round off the lineup. There's even a full-page ad taken out in Rolling Stone, and in no time, ticket orders are flying in. There's just one problem. Officials in Warwick County, Indiana had apparently heard all about these stoned, half-naked hippies who overran Evansville a month earlier, and they want nothing to do with it. Even though Chandler Raceway was private land, they sued in court to block the festival from taking place. And 1 week later, citing concerns about security, sanitation, and traffic, the county's injunction was granted. The festival could not be held legally at Chandler Raceway. Now, Bob and Tom were not particularly worried. Losing your first venue was standard practice at this point. As Tom Duncan told a local paper, you don't have a festival without an injunction. And meanwhile, the hype was getting real. The Chicago station WLS was talking about it non-stop, which was a big deal since their signal could reach basically half the country. But more attention also meant more concerned citizens, terrified about what was soon to be unfolding in their backyard. Like dominoes, each of the neighboring counties also filed injunctions to keep Erie Canal out. And in a matter of days, Bob and Tom's festival was legally banned from all of southwest Indiana. This is where the panic set in. We weren't sleeping at night, Alexander told the Evansville Courier and Press. We thought that everything was going to just go down the drain. But we'd spent over $700,000, so our position was that we had to do this festival some way. Come hell or high water, the people were going to have an event. And sure enough, a mysterious property would soon come to their attention. The plot of land known as Bull Island was technically part of Illinois, but rested on the Indiana side of the Wabash River. Just one of those anomalies that happens when a river changes course over time. For Bob and Tom, though, it was kind of perfect. It wasn't in Indiana, so none of the injunctions applied. Also, since it wasn't directly accessible by any road from Illinois, it was very difficult for Illinois authorities to monitor what was going on. It was kind of like international waters. So Bull Island becomes the new location, but secretly. Bob and Tom have become a little more savvy and realize that by waiting to make an official announcement, the county won't have enough time to file an injunction. So they just wait. It's less than a week before the festival is set to begin, and fans are pouring into southern Indiana. Many of them still heading to the original destination of Chandler Raceway, but others are going to nearby towns, sleeping in public parks. Now, suddenly, all those county officials who worked so hard to keep the festival out are thinking, shoot, what if it actually is canceled? What are all these people gonna do? But finally, in the early hours of Friday morning, Bob and Tom announced the location. And by afternoon, tens of thousands of people are clogging the roads, heading to Bull Island.
There were problems from the very beginning. Every shoulder of every road leading to the festival site, including a 4-mile stretch of interstate highway, was jammed with parked cars. Rock fans decided to walk rather than wait out the traffic jams. The road had been built only a week before to haul timber from the island. It is dusty and dirty, and the young people making their way down the road resembled a defeated army.
This defeated army, however, was just stoked to be there. As they settled in and set up camp, they were cheerfully willing to overlook the mess before them. The lack of water and bathrooms, the silence from the stage as technicians fumbled with the sound system. Instead, the festival goers took a stroll down Alice in Wonderland Lane, as it was called, where dealers peddled every kind of drug you could imagine, right there out in the open. After all, there was reportedly only 3 Illinois sheriffs on the entire island. The music fans skinny dipped in the Wabash River. They made bonfires from spare wood and sat around drinking Boone's Farm wine. Seriously, so many accounts of this festival mentioned Boone's Farm specifically, I had to try some for myself. It was okay. The next morning, the music officially began. The blues player Albert King kicked things off with an especially wild and memorable set. Unfortunately, it wasn't caught on camera, but let's just pretend. Saturday afternoon was also about the time when people began to realize just how disorganized this event truly was. Just imagine, the morning rolls around, you go to refill your canteen, but there's a line a city block long because only 3 or 4 of the water pumps actually work. Next, you go to do your business and realize there isn't a bathroom in sight. After asking someone nearby, they point to a swampy area that was dubbed Turd Fields. It's not exactly Bob and Tom's fault. Some 400 outhouses were under construction at Chandler Raceway, but when the location was switched last minute, there wasn't nearly enough time to set them back up.
The promoters had promised 400 outdoor privies. One medical volunteer said there were no more than 6.
Let me repeat that. 6. As the days went on, as many as 275,000 people would show up on Bull Island. That means there was roughly 1 toilet for every 46,000 people. That would be like having 1 toilet for an entire sold-out crowd at Wrigley Field. Contributing to the sour mood was the fact that Joe Cocker and Black Sabbath had yet to show up. Both made it into Evansville, but upon seeing that the crowd was well over the 50,000 stipulated in their contracts, they demanded more money. When the promoters couldn't cough it up, the band simply bailed. Although it's also very possible that they feared for their safety. All in all, the vibe on Bull Island that night remained positive. Despite constant chanting for Joe Cocker throughout the night, the crowd enjoyed some more wild sets, including one from the hard rock band Birtha. Again, none of these were captured on film, but we'll just pretend.
So far, the weather has been no problem, but there is only one road leading to the site of the Erie Canal Soda Pop Rock Festival. It's sand and dirt. A good hard rain will turn it into a swamp, making it impassable, and there will be more misery on Bull Island.
And sure enough, overnight, a quarter-inch of rain does indeed fall over the festival, turning the grounds into a muddy pit. At this point, I imagine even the most glass-is-half-full attendees were beginning to notice the misery around them. One important detail about Bull Island is that the drug choices were much more sinister than they had been at Woodstock. The tiny medical team of 3 doctors and 15 nurses was completely overwhelmed with kids suffering from bad trips, poisoning, and overdoses. Acid was laced with strychnine, bleach was sold as cocaine. Announcements were constantly going out over the PA, warning patrons not to take drugs from certain vendors. But it was the lack of food that was really starting to give the event a Lord of the Flies vibe. A group of festival goers are so hungry they find a cow still grazing on the island and decide to slaughter it. Their attempts to cook it, however, fail, leaving behind this grotesque monument, perhaps the perfect symbol for what was now unfolding. The lone food vendor, Reese Catering, was so overwhelmed they ended up raising prices, gradually at first, but eventually as high as $10 per hamburger. That's $63 in today's money. The crowd puts up with it at first, but quickly reaches a breaking point and begins to loot the mobile kitchen. They steal hot dogs, buns, and whatever else they can find, while the kitchen workers hide in a corner. And this would happen repeatedly. A tractor full of beer was bum-rushed and robbed. A semi-truck full of red soda and cigarettes was stormed by people who simply threw the goods out into the crowd. At least they were sharing. The music did continue, with Ravi Shankar, Canned Heat, and Black Oak, Arkansas all taking the stage that day. However, the crowd was most hyped to see Rod Stewart and the Faces, the main headliner of the entire 3-day festival. Like Cocker and Sabbath, they too arrived into town, found it a complete mess, and decided to bail. Likewise, Fleetwood Mac, the Allman Brothers, and the Doors would all cancel, leading to long gaps on the stage. With boredom, frustration, and disappointment, a few members of the crowd headed over to the now abandoned catering trucks and began to set it on fire. They started feeding the fire with any wood they could get their hands on, one attendee wrote. Pretty soon you could hear the caterers' gas tanks and tires explode. Later you could hear people clapping and shouting higher, higher as they watched the fire get bigger. You could see the eerie glow of that fire way into the night. Now, normally, you'd think at this point a festival like this would be canceled. It's way past the point of being a health emergency, and is now something of a public safety emergency too. While I'm sure some group of officials must have gotten together to discuss their options, they clearly decided the easiest way forward was just to let it run its course. Fortunately, things were wrapping up sooner than later. Come Monday morning, most of the crowd had entered the acceptance stage of grief, that their favorite headliners were not going to show up. As bands like the Doobie Brothers and the then unknown Eagles took the stage, there was less than half the original crowd remaining. As people walked back to their cars, dehydrated, dejected, and dispirited, many found their vehicles broken into, tires stolen, or worse, not there at all. Every single car that was parked along the expressway, for example, got towed. Just getting out of the area required drastic measures. It reminded me of people fleeing a village in wartime, recounted an Indiana state policeman. They were hanging off vehicles. There was debris and trash everywhere. Back on Bull Island, however, a small group of diehards were sticking it out. Even long after the final band had finished, they held out hope that Rod Stewart would indeed be making a last-minute appearance. All through the night they waited, but when the sun finally began to rise Tuesday morning, even these fans were forced to come to reality. In a final act of defiance, some 100 of them stormed the stage, ripped apart the scaffolding, and set the entire wooden structure on fire. Along with it burned the mobile homes that served as dressing rooms and a few trucks that were backstage. The Erie Canal and Soda Pop Rock Festival had officially gone down in flames. Later that afternoon, some 25 Illinois state troopers would scour the property for stragglers, as well as potential overdose victims who may have gone unnoticed. The trash was so thick, the landowner wouldn't even bother cleaning it up. He simply bulldozed it, burying the trash under layers of soil, where it continues to decompose today. Fortunately, the state troopers did not find anyone that afternoon, although there were 2 deaths that occurred earlier. One young man drowned in the Wabash River, allegedly trying to avoid paying the entrance fee, and another young man died of an overdose when he could not be brought to the hospital in time. Any festival that ends in death is a tragedy, but Bull Island is a tragedy that could have been a much bigger tragedy. Perhaps it truly is a testament to the peacefulness of the hippie generation that things didn't get much worse. The organizers, Bob Alexander and Tom Duncan, faced a laundry list of lawsuits and fines. They were even jailed for failure to pay up on one of the judgments, but after they were able to prove that they were indeed completely broke, in part because so many people snuck in for free, they were released. Tom Duncan left the business a few years later, but Bob Alexander had a long and successful career in promotions and media. In late 2020, he passed away at age 77. So was Bull Island the worst music festival of all time? Well, before we answer that question, I think it's important to cut Bob and Tom some slack. Had the festival gone on as originally planned at Chandler Raceway, there would have been far fewer issues. All those local officials who fought so hard to keep the festival out, well, they were ironically making it a much bigger mess. Also, Bull Island deserves some credit for, well, actually happening. Unlike Fyre Fest, there was at least some music every night, and so many of the attendees, in spite of everything, have fond memories, drinking their Boone's Farm wine, walking down Alice in Wonderland Lane, swimming in the Wabash River. That said, when you take a step back, Bull Island really does seem like some cruel reality TV show. 250,000 people just dropped on an island with no shelter, toilets, or drinking water, given all sorts of drugs but with some poisonous doses mixed in. And on the 3rd day, when there just isn't enough drama, the producers raise the price of a hamburger to $63 just to see how everyone reacts. It's perhaps the most surreal music festival of all time. I want to give a huge thank you to the folks on the Bull Island Facebook group for digging up so many great resources. Also to Dan Davis for writing this book, and to Sean McDevitt for all the work he's done to catalog the festival, including tracking down this footage from the Indiana State Police. Cheers.